Greetings again everyone, and today I've had the opportunity to review a final production copy of a brand new Canon lens for their mirrorless EOS R system cameras, the RF24mm f1.4L VCM. I made a preview of this lens a couple of months ago with a beta version, and now I can wrap up my final tests with it, which is very exciting as I absolutely love bright aperture 24mm full frame optics. The very wide angle images they can get have a touch of drama to them, while that very bright maximum aperture of f1.4 lets in tons of light, even getting you rather out of focus backgrounds. Well, if you get a bit closer to your subject, of course. Its price of $1,500 or £1,679 here in the UK makes it a pricey option, but actually original manufacturers' 24mm f1.4 lenses always tend to be expensive, as it's a difficult optic to design, optically correct and manufacture. I would like to thank Canon UK for loaning me this lens for testing, but as usual this is a totally independent review and they've had no input into the video at all. The lens is about the normal size for an optic in its class, but at 515 grams or a bit over a pound, it's not too heavy to handle. It's essentially the same design as their other recent hybrid prime lenses. The lens is well weather sealed, including a weather sealing gasket around the rear mount. Next, an aperture ring, which turns completely smoothly and can be locked in or out of automatic mode. Due to the way Canon's mount system currently works, this ring will only work when shooting in video mode and not when shooting stills, except on the new R1 and R5 Mark II cameras, where it will work with both, as well as other cameras released in 2025 onwards. Apparently, there may be future firmware updates for older Canon cameras to get that aperture ring working in stills mode too. It's just a quirk of the RF mount system. Next, on the lens's body we see a customizable button with an auto manual focus switch and a switch to lock the aperture ring in or out of automatic mode. Then we get quite a broad rubberized manual focus ring, which turns very smoothly and works responsively with the focus motor. The lens doesn't really display any focus breathing here, although we can see a little distortion warping if you're making huge sudden focus pulls. As for the autofocus system, well, the voice coil motor makes it work silently, accurately, and basically instantaneously, with no trouble at all tracking subject. This is Canon at their very best here, and just as well considering how much the lens costs. In front of that focus ring we get one of Canon's customizable control rings with gentle clicks to it. I'm glad that thing is at the end of the lens, out of the way, as it's something I never use myself, but I know that other people do. The front of the lens has a 67mm filter thread. It comes with a plastic lockable lens hood, which is a generous size for a 24mm lens, but it does not have its own optical image stabilization. Overall, the lens is built fantastically well here, and electronically it functions perfectly for both stills and video work. How about image quality though? Let's start by testing it on a full frame camera, my 45MP Canon EOS R5. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. In the middle of the image we see absolutely perfect sharpness and contrast straight from f1.4. Nice! Let's have a look over in the corners. At f1.4 they're just a touch softer but still very sharp with very good contrast. This is actually about as good as it gets for 24mm f1.4 and certainly miles better than their older EF mount equivalent lens from 2008. At f2 those corners look just a touch brighter, and at f2.8 there's just a touch more sharpness and contrast, only a tiny bit, and that's as sharp as the lens gets, even if you stop down further to f8. So we never quite see absolute razor sharpness in those image corners, which is a little bit of a shame, but honestly that performance at f1.4 is pretty spectacular. This is a great lens on full frame. So let's try it out on aps-c on the very challenging 32MP sensor of my Canon EOS R7. Again, straight from f1.4, sharpness and contrast are pretty much perfect in the middle, and corner image quality, again very good indeed, especially considering the demanding sensor we're working on, but not quite razor sharp. Again, even if you stop down to f2.8 or even f5.6, you can't really squeeze any last drops of sharpness out here, I'm afraid, but nevertheless it's still a great performance. Once you stop down to f8 or f11, softness creeps in due to diffraction. Okay, let's bypass in-camera corrections by shooting in RAW and take a look at distortion and vignetting. Right away, we can see why that image quality is never quite razor sharp in the image corners. An alarming level of barrel distortion is forcing your camera or editing software to stretch those image corners back into shape, unfortunately. It's such a shame to see this, but I'm afraid that's just one of the optical choices most manufacturers are making these days. Anyway, vignetting is strong too at f1.4, at f2 and f2.8 those corners do brighten up though, so if you're shooting in RAW, make absolutely sure your images are getting properly corrected in editing. This lens can focus down to about 24 centimeters, which is a lovely strength. It's lots of fun getting up close and personal with a bright aperture lens like this. The further good news is that, even at f1.4, sharpness and contrast closer up remain very good, although we're seeing just a touch of purple fringing on contrasting edges. Stop down to f2 and the image clears up, leaving perfect sharpness and contrast again. Let's see how well the lens works against bright light. A great performance here, only a little flaring is visible at certain points, but it's actually pretty transparent and not a real problem at all. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look for coma and sun stars. Even at f1.4, I can't see any coma spearing on bright points of light in your image corners here. Nice. Well, let's zoom out again and look for sun stars. They only begin to emerge at f11 and get a little stronger at f16, so I was hoping for a little more there. Next, bokeh. The good news is that this lens's out of focus backgrounds look wonderfully soft, some of the nicest I've yet seen on a 24mm lens. The only issue I will mention is that specular highlights in the image corners have, you guessed it, a cat's eye shape to them, but that is simply what you expect on nearly any bright aperture lens. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f1.4 it's a little strong here, as you can see. It's still hanging around a bit at f2, but it's gone at f2.8, so that's just an average performance. Overall though, the Canon RF 24mm f1.4 L VCM is fantastic. One of the best 24mm f1.4 lenses I've ever tested. Not only that, but it's fun to use and has useful features for shooting video as well. Almost everything about its optics are great, and at the end of the day it simply gets you stunning images. It's such a shame to see the lens's uncorrected barrel distortion though, which forces such strong in-camera corrections, but at the end of the day, like I said, almost every manufacturer is going in that direction these days, as it seems to help them keep their designs smaller and simpler. Also, once corrected, your images still have plenty of corner sharpness to them at f1.4, so I'm going to forgive them this particular sin and say that the lens still comes highly recommended, well, for photographers with deep pockets anyway. Thanks for watching everyone, and a special thanks to my Patreon supporters for helping to keep these sponsorship-free reviews coming. I love producing extra videos just for them, so check out the link in the description below. Ciao for now, everyone.